They tell us the 1950s economy was simple, but the truth is, it was designed to protect you. Today, the system is designed to drain you. If you've ever wondered why your grandparents could retire with a full pension, a paid-off home, and no debt, while the modern world feels like a sinking ship, the answer isn't just inflation. It's a lost financial blueprint built on something we've completely abandoned, a secret called iron trust. Close your eyes and try to remember the sound of a dollar that actually meant something. It wasn't the sterile beep of a plastic card or the silent update of a banking app. It was the heavy, rhythmic jingle of silver quarters in a leather pocket. It was the crisp, tactile snap of a $20 bill that had the power to feed a family of 4 for an entire week. In 1954, the American economy didn't feel like a predatory machine designed to track your every click. It felt like a community. When you walked into the local five and dime, you weren't just a consumer or a data point to be harvested. You were a neighbor. The man behind the butcher counter knew your name. He knew your favorite cut of meat. And, most importantly, he knew if your word was good. Today, we are told that our modern world is better because it's faster. We have instant credit, overnight shipping, and 1,000 ways to spend money we haven't even earned yet. But look around. Ask yourself, why does it feel like everyone is running faster just to stay in the same place? Why does a 6-figure salary in 2026 feel more fragile, more thin than a factory worker's paycheck in 1955? The truth is, your grandparents had a secret. It wasn't just that things were cheaper. It was that they lived in an era where the economy was built on common sense, physical reality, and the undeniable strength of a handshake. Tonight, we're going back. We're going to peel back the neon layers of modern marketing to rediscover the forgotten financial blueprint that kept the greatest generation stable, secure, and, most importantly, free. Welcome back to Vintage American Life. Let's remember how we used to live.
To understand why the 1950s felt so stable, you have to look at where the money lived. Today, your financial life is a series of codes, passwords, and distant servers. But in 1954, the local bank wasn't just a building, it was an anchor. It was usually the most imposing structure on Main Street, built with marble, heavy oak, and brass, designed to tell you one thing: your hard work is safe here. Back then, the bank didn't use an algorithm to decide your worth. It used a person. Imagine walking into a lobby where the manager didn't sit behind a bulletproof partition, but at a wooden desk in the open air. His job wasn't to cross-sell you on high-interest credit cards or complex derivatives. His job was to know the community. When a young veteran walked in to ask for a mortgage, the manager didn't just look at a 3-digit credit score, a system that didn't even exist yet. He looked at his character. He knew where he worked, he knew his family, and he knew his reputation. This was the iron trust in action. A loan was a pact between two neighbors. If you shook a man's hand in that office, you weren't just signing a contract, you were giving your word to the town itself. There was a famous 3-6-3 rule that governed the era. Bankers would pay 3% in interest on savings, lend it out at 6% for mortgages, and be on the golf course or at a community meeting by 3 o'clock. It sounds simple, maybe even lazy by today's hyper-capitalist standards. But that simplicity was the secret to the American dream, because the bank's profit was tied to the success of the neighborhood, not its exploitation of it. When your local bank only succeeds if your local businesses succeed, everyone wins. But when your money is swept up into a global web of digital speculation, the social trust begins to evaporate. In the 1950s, you didn't just have an account, you had a place. And in that place,
your character was the highest form of currency. Beyond the marble walls of the bank, the real strength of the 1950s economy was hidden in the back of every American home. It was a philosophy that has all but vanished today: the art of repair. In the modern world, we are trained to be consumers. When a toaster breaks, we throw it away. When a shirt tears, we buy a new one. We've been conditioned to believe that new is always better, while our trash heaps grow and our bank accounts shrink. But in the 1950s, you weren't a consumer, you were a steward. Think back to the kitchen of that era. The appliances weren't made of thin, painted plastic. They were heavy steel and chrome. A refrigerator wasn't a 5-year disposable gadget. It was a 20-year investment. And if it stopped working, you didn't scroll through a website for a replacement. You called the local repairman, or better yet, you opened your own toolbox. There was a profound, invisible savings in this way of life. By maintaining what they owned, the greatest generation kept their wealth from leaking out of the household. Every time a father spent an hour at a workbench fixing a lamp, or a mother sat at a sewing machine mending a coat, they were essentially paying themselves. They were refusing to let the disposability trap take a bite out of their paycheck. This repair culture created a secondary economy, a network of local cobblers, watchmakers, and small engine shops. These weren't giant corporations, they were neighbors helping neighbors. It was a cycle of social trust that ensured money stayed in the hands of the people who worked for it, rather than being vacuumed up by a distant headquarters. Today, we are surrounded by smart devices that are designed to fail, a concept known as planned obsolescence. It's a system that forces you into a permanent state of debt just to maintain a basic standard of living. Your grandparents didn't have more stuff than we do, but the stuff they had, they owned it. It didn't own them. And in that simple distinction lies the secret to a life that was stable, sustainable, and remarkably quiet. If the bank was the anchor of the 1950s economy, and the home was the warehouse, then the street was the engine. And that engine ran on a system of local loops that have almost entirely vanished from the American landscape. Take, for instance, the milkman. To a modern eye, the idea of a man in a white uniform delivering glass bottles to your doorstep seems like a quaint, inefficient relic of a bygone era. But economically, it was a masterpiece of social trust. When you paid the milkman, that dollar didn't disappear into a global investment fund or a Silicon Valley clearinghouse. That dollar stayed in the local loop. The milkman lived 3 blocks away. He spent his earnings at the local barber, who in turn bought his lunch at the neighborhood diner, who bought their eggs from the farm just outside of town. Economists call this the velocity of money, but your grandparents just called it taking care of your own. In the 1950s, a single dollar could circulate through a town 7, 8, or 9 times before it ever left the zip code. This created a circular wealth effect. It meant that even a town with modest incomes could feel incredibly wealthy because the money was constantly working for the people who lived there. It was an economy with no leaks. Today, our economy is a series of one-way pipes. We spend our money at massive digital retailers and global chains. The moment you click buy or swipe your card at a big box store, that wealth is vacuumed out of your community and sent to a distant headquarters, never to return. The middleman of the 1950s, the milkman, the local grocer, the independent pharmacist, wasn't just an employee. They were the guardians of the local dollar. They ensured that the iron trust remained physical. When we traded the milkman for the convenience of the supermarket, and later the supermarket for the convenience of the smartphone, we didn't just change how we shopped, we broke the loop. We traded the stability of a circular economy for the hollow speed of a global one. and in that trade, the neighborhood lost its pulse. While the world outside was built on local loops, the internal world of the 1950s home was governed by a strict physical reality. It was a blueprint for financial peace that required no spreadsheets, no apps, and no credit monitoring. It was the era of the envelope. In most households, when the weekly paycheck arrived, it was cashed immediately. People wanted to feel the weight of their labor. They would sit at the kitchen table and divide that cash into physical envelopes, one for rent, one for the grocer, one for the church, and one for the rainy day. This created something modern banking has tried to eliminate: friction. When you spend digital numbers on a screen, there is no pain. But when you reach into an envelope and see it becoming empty, your brain registers a warning. This physical friction was the greatest defense against debt ever invented. In 1954, if the envelope was empty, the shopping was over. There was no buy now, pay later. There was only the quiet, dignified discipline of waiting. This wasn't just about math, it was about the stitch-in-time mentality. Your grandparents didn't view a purchase as the end of a transaction, they viewed it as the beginning of a responsibility. They bought the best they could afford, and then they took care of it with a ferocity we've forgotten. They didn't feel the need to upgrade their lives every 2 years because their status wasn't tied to what they bought, but to what they kept. Today, we are marketed to 24 hours a day. We are told that we are behind if we don't have the latest version of a tool that isn't even broken. We've traded the envelope system for a credit system that encourages us to live in our future's basement. By reclaiming the physicality of money, by looking at our wealth as a finite, precious resource rather than an endless digital stream, we can begin to feel that 1950s stability again. Your grandparents didn't have more money, they just had a closer relationship with the money they had. They respected the dollar, and in return, the dollar looked after them.
If the 1950s were defined by iron trust and physical reality, the decades that followed were defined by something else: the Great Disconnect. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a single day when the golden era ended and the modern struggle began. Instead, it was a slow, quiet erosion of the foundations we've been discussing. The first crack appeared in the early 1970s. For decades, the American dollar was anchored to something real, something you could hold, melt, and trust: gold. But in 1971, that anchor was cut. Suddenly, money was no longer a representation of a physical asset, it was a representation of a promise. As the physicality of money vanished, so did the social trust of our neighborhoods. The local bank manager who knew your name was replaced by a regional vice president who only knew your file number. The envelope system was replaced by a piece of magnetic plastic called the credit card. We were told this was progress. We were told that convenience was the ultimate goal of the American dream. But convenience has a hidden price tag. By the 1980s and 90s, the local loops we talked about were being dismantled. The milkman's route was replaced by the global supply chain. The neighborhood five and dime was crushed by the weight of the massive big box retailer. We traded our circular wealth for cheap abundance. We got lower prices, yes, but we lost the velocity of money that kept our towns alive. We moved from the front porch to the backyard fence. We traded the rhythmic creak of a porch swing for the hum of a central air conditioner. We became more connected through screens, yet more isolated in our own debt. The Great Disconnect wasn't just about economics, it was about the loss of the handshake. We moved into an era where nobody was responsible because the system was too big to hold anyone accountable. Today, we look back at the 1950s not just because of the cars or the fashion, but because we are hungry for a world that made sense.
We are looking for the iron trust in a world that feels increasingly made of sand. The disconnect is complete, but understanding how it happened is the first step toward finding our way back.
So, where does that leave us today? It's easy to look back at the 1950s and feel a sense of loss, as if that world of marble banks, local loops, and the iron trust is a ghost that can never be summoned again. But the truth is more hopeful than that. The golden era wasn't a result of the calendar. It was a result of choices. Your grandparents didn't live in a perfect world, but they lived in a human one. They understood that an economy is only as strong as the trust between neighbors. And while we cannot turn back the clock to 1954, we can reclaim the blueprint they left behind. We can choose to find friction again, to value the physical over the digital. We can choose to support the local loops that still exist, buying from the neighbor instead of the corporation. We can choose to be stewards of what we own, repairing rather than replacing, and finding dignity in the things that last. But most importantly, we can reclaim the handshake. In a world that feels increasingly fragmented and faceless, the greatest act of rebellion is to build a community, to be a person whose word is iron, to look for the social trust in your own zip code. The 1950s common-sense economy wasn't just about money. It was about a way of standing in the world. It was about security, stability, and the quiet peace of a home built on a solid foundation. The dollar may have changed, and the milkman may have retired, but the values that made that era golden are still available to anyone brave enough to practice them. Because in the end, the iron trust isn't a period in history. It's a promise we make to each other. Thank you for walking down this path with us. If you remember this world, or if you're trying to build a piece of it for your own family, stay with us. There is so much more to remember. Welcome home to Vintage American Life.